Welcome to our new exhibit, The Emergence of a National Historic Site, St. Paul's Between the World Wars. It is on display in the museum at St. Paul's Church National Historic Site in Mount Vernon, New York. This audiovisual program serves primarily as a guide for visitors who are viewing the display at the site, but it might also be of interest to a remote audience. For the visitors, we would expect you to pause the program for a closer look at any juncture, or perhaps follow along with this audio and then return to particular elements of the display for a closer examination. It would probably take about 45 minutes to gain a full appreciation of the exhibition. At the opening panel, you're looking at a large photo of unemployed local Mount Vernon men working on a project to transform the historic burial yard at St. Paul's. This project was funded through the Civil Works Administration, one of the Depression-era public works agencies created to put people to work. The other photo shows a large school group from nearby Mamaroneck, New York, visiting the church on an educational field trip in the 1930s. The minister, Reverend Harold Weigel, is pictured with them. The text introduces the developments and changes at St. Paul's in the 1920s and 1930s that led to the emergence of the church and grounds as a National Historic Site, which is the central theme of the exhibit. The three photos show the churchyard in the 1930s. Step around the corner and observe many posters of newspaper ads for automobiles and radios, along with the sports page from the local paper from the 1920s, helping to set the scene for the period covered by the exhibition. Pivot and look at the upright display case along the wall. It has a promotional real estate brochure which reflects the housing construction boom in lower Westchester communities in the 1920s that was influenced by the development of parkways in the county. The confluence of new highways, increased automobile ownership, and greater availability of private homes in these communities contributed to the population dispersal from the St. Paul's neighborhood. Turn around and locate the large display case with the tall hood and several items. These are artifacts of the entertainment and communications innovations of the 1920s. The candlestick telephone, ringer box, and radio were state-of-the-art at the time. Now you're ready to explore the exhibit panels. The first one, St. Paul's in the 1920s, describes the impact of changes in this area brought on by urbanization and industrialization, which, significantly here, led to the building you're standing in. The next panel tells the story of the Reverend Harold T. Weigel, who was the rector at St. Paul's in this period, and how he created a vision of a National Historic Site. The third panel explores the transformation of the historic section of the St. Paul's Cemetery in line with the creation of a historic site that could be enjoyed by visitors and tourists. Pivot to the case with the baseball glove, a 1920s first baseman's mitt, and think about how gloves have changed over the years. Now, back to the wall panels. Read about the Great Depression and the St. Paul's area, which suffered along with the rest of the country in the 1930s. With so many parishioners facing financial strains, the church turned to outside funding for operations and especially the restoration project of the late 1930s. Those efforts introduced the church and its history to a broader audience of prosperous and influential people, but they also yielded control of the parish's operations to the rich donors and created a clash with some longtime congregants who resented the move to recreate the church of the late 18th century. Pivot to the case with the automobile items, the license plate and the car horn, which would have been set on the outside of the automobile driver's side. Drivers had to blow the horn by squeezing the rubber ball when approaching an intersection or a pedestrian. Now, take a look at the panel Cemeteries in History, the end of the Potter's Field, which recounts the details of how a series of lawsuits and a growing awareness of the grounds as historic and significant led to an important transformation on the eastern side of the cemetery. The far wall shows several panels of an excellent Works Progress Administration mural from the 1930s. It remains on display at the post office in Portchester, Westchester County. Look at the display booth. and the mannequin which represents Sarah E. Nelson, who is the last member of a remarkable black family to live on an ancestral homestead located just east of the church property. The family's moving story from slavery to freedom, 3 generations, is described in text, documents, and images on the booth. Pivot to the case with the scrapbook and the typewriter. Read over the labels describing those artifacts and their connection to the themes of the exhibit. Finally, look at a set of images arrayed over the fireplace. They document in words and pictures various themes of the 1920s and 30s, the period covered in this display. Thanks for coming by. Please ask staff if you have additional questions or you would like them to turn on the CD, which belts out some of the classic tunes of the 1920s and 1930s.